I heard the gentleman from California a few minutes ago talk about how we have an obligation, while this is mandatory spending, we have an obligation to protect the lands that we own as a federal government. Mr. Chairman, we also have an obligation to ensure that the areas where this money is derived from similarly is maintained. As I have said in this committee dozens and dozens of times, we have lost 2,000 square miles of the coast of Louisiana, where I think I can say the majority of these funds have come from. From the Gulf of Mexico, we've produced $200 billion for the United States Treasury. $200 billion. In return, for example, last year, we got $11 million. That is just over 0.4%. $11 million on billions of dollars in revenue. This area is not sustainable, and some of this has to do with the historic energy production activities in this very area. We're taking money from areas that are unsustainable and deciding we're going to invest them and make other areas sustainable. That is a very concerning proposition. This bipartisan legislation, thank you, it increases revenue sharing for offshore energy production from 37.5% to 50%. I want to be very clear on this because there's been a lot of misinformation, I think misunderstanding. When I say increasing from 37.5% to 50%, that current law of 37.5% only generated a 0.4% return in last year. 0.4%. So we're not talking about going from 37.5% of all offshore energy production to 50% of all offshore energy production. It is a small subset of production, as evidenced by the fact that current law sharing 37.5% only generated $11 million to the state of Louisiana on billions of dollars in revenue. Importantly, Mr. Chairman, I want to be clear that number one, the existing revenue stream to the state of Louisiana under our state's constitution, 100% of it is dedicated back to coastal resiliency projects. We're not spending this on anything other than coastal resiliency. In fact, we have a plan that has to be submitted annually to the legislature to go through a public process where we spend millions of dollars bringing the best scientists in from around the world, looking at storm intensity futures, sea rise futures, and every other consideration to make sure that we have the best plan. We've been given accolades by then Administrator of the EPA, Lisa Jackson, to oil and gas companies, one side of the spectrum to others, and strong support for these plans. The additional 12.5% that we're talking under this legislation, it would be required that every penny of that goes to federally authorized resiliency projects. Mr. Chairman, I mentioned earlier, we've had 215 disasters in this nation since 1980. They have cost this country, 215 disasters since 1980 that cost over $1 billion a pop. They have cost this country $1.5 trillion. We've got to stop the stupidity of spending billions of dollars after disasters instead of millions before. This bill is designed to invest dollars in resiliency projects to reduce future disaster cost. This is designed, according to the CBO, to save $3 for every $1 invested. Other studies say it's up to $8 for every $1 invested. With that, I yield back.